today with Virgil Ortiz. And he will be joining us in just a moment. And before we begin, I just want to mention how our conversation will go today as Virgil comes on. I'll mention that we'll start with a conversation, and it'll go for about 40 to 45 minutes. And then following that, I'll take questions to pose to Virgil. So to ask a question, it would be great if you could go to your Q&A box, which is down at the bottom of your screen. It says Q&A, and you'll see a little icon that looks like a speech bubble. You click on that and you type in your questions. And I want to make sure that you know that those questions aren't being seen throughout the conversation. They go just to me. I'm the only person to see them. And at the end, I'll pose those to Virgil. So be sure to do that. And don't be shy. Be sure to ask away. And we will get started. So we are waiting for Virgil. Virgil, are you on? There he is.
How's it going?
Hi, Virgil. How are you today?
Doing good. Trying to stay warm. Hope everybody's doing well.
Yeah, it's a chilly day, and we know there are lots of storms throughout the country, and people are probably pretty chilly, but it's nice to see your face. I'm really excited about this conversation. So it's a pleasure to be in conversation today. And to start, what we're going to do is show some images. And basically, I'm going to start with a question for you. It would be great to hear a bit about your background to begin with. And could you tell us about your family, how you became an artist, and how teaching fits into your practice? Because I know all of those things are very important. And I know that's a really multifaceted question, but I think it's a really important one to start with your body of work and your practice.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for this opportunity to hang out with you guys. I'm looking forward to all the projects that are coming up at the Anderson Ranch. But yeah, definitely I was lucky. I was born into a family of potters on our mother Severina Ortiz side of the family. So like all of the grandmothers, great grandmothers, all of them, a lot of my cousins and my family members are also potters. So art was always around us on a daily basis, and I had no idea it was art that was being created, just because our mom would be on her studio table, which was our kitchen table, every day creating pottery, and she never forced it on us or anything like that. She always would offer like, hey, sit down, touch the clay and hang out with me, pick it up if you want. But so that was just kind of like, every day after school we'd always play with it. And it's kind of cool that she kept a lot of the pieces that I made and actually bought them for me when I was back to 6 years old. So wow. It's kind of cool.
Amazing gift that she shared with you too.
Yeah, I mean, the best professors, I never went to school for anything, so it was all kind of learned, like how we learn a lot here in Coach de Pueblo. Like our language is taught verbally, all of our traditions, our ceremonies are the same way, so our art is the same way too. But it's just kind of funny, like how she always would tell me that I would get some money and ask her to take me right to the store and start buying action figures, Star Wars, because that was a huge influence on me. So that's what it and really influenced me to keep on working in clay. Was like I knew I could make some money off of it and go buy some toys. But yeah, it's just just growing up with it, like our family used all the traditional methods and materials, which is means that we hand dig, dig the clay, dig all the different ingredients that we use to make our clay. All of our paints are handmade. The first slide you'll see is my parents, Guadalupe and Severina Ortiz, and also some of my family members that are making the next slide. Yeah, there. That are continuing to make pottery today. So some of my nephews, DJ Kyle, Harlan, Lisa, myself, our dad, we lost him in 2015. And then one of my younger nieces, Dominique, my sisters, Joyce and Janice. So we tried to remember all the teachings that our parents taught us, and like how to go get all the different materials. So this is how we're trying to hold on this tradition and make sure it doesn't die out here in the Pueblo. But yeah, that's how I learned. So I just kind of just picked it up, being in a creative family. Our dad was a drum maker, and it's just like it's kind of awful because the art of making traditional Coche de Pueblo pottery is dying out, because of the it's just a dying art form. A lot of the family members that had masters in their families, you know, all of the older folks are passing away. So it's like up to our generation to really keep that tradition going. But if you haven't been doing it since you were a kid, like since I was, right, it's really hard because normally you'll have a family, you'll have a job outside of the Pueblo, and to use all these traditional methods and materials, it's very time consuming. And to make a living at it, it's like really hard to do, to try to jump back in. So we're just trying to really encourage all the kids to learn it and to make sure it doesn't die out.
Yeah, and I think that art itself oftentimes doesn't necessarily serve the basic practicalities in life, but it's so vital and so important. So it's so wonderful that you're working so hard to keep it alive and to keep it alive within your community and your family. And it's amazing too, what you just mentioned, when you talked about your age, it makes me think about how you must have been working with clay in your earliest memories, like maybe even before you could remember. Some of your earliest memories must have been that, and that's pretty impactful on a person.
Yeah, I thought all my friends were artists. I mean, like I didn't even know it was art. Like I told you, after school, you know, most of the kids would go play, but I come back and, you know, draw or paint or, you know, work with clay. And it wasn't until like I was like maybe 15 years old that I realized it was art, and like not everybody did it. So
Yeah.
and like I invited one of my main influences and my resources, and a person that has helped me throughout my career. His name is Robert Gallegos. He should, hopefully he's on this Zoom, but he is a dealer out of Albuquerque. So he would visit the pueblos and do purchasing trips. So he knew my parents when I was like 6 years old. So he kind of knew me as a kid growing up, and all the ways that or the subject matter that I learned from our parents started changing, and I started experimenting by myself. So he was asking them like, who's teaching this kid how to like all these designs, and like, you know, they're, instead of making the storyteller signature from Cochiti, which is a seated mother carrying babies, they started standing up, and I started painting them with a sense of fashion in mind. And my parents just said like he's experimenting, so they always supported me 100%, right? So at that point we had never been to his studio, his showroom in Albuquerque, and he had invited us down. My parents and I both went, and it was the first time we went there. We walked in and we just about lost it because all of the pieces that he had, it turned out they had the largest collection of pieces from the late 1800s, and from Cochiti figurative pottery, and all the pieces that I was experimenting on looked almost like identical to them. So that was like a point in my life where I realized that I was going to dedicate my life to clay and to revive the pieces from the 1800s.
Wow, that's so incredible. And how amazing to hear from an artist who has that support from the beginning. Again, I would say that a lot of artists, their stories are that their families rejected that they're becoming an artist. It's been a trial. And so this is a really unique story and a really wonderful one. I think we can go to the next image.
Yeah.
And we'll see sort of a little bit more to the story, because you there's a process of pumice stone gathering with your family and what that entails. And maybe you could talk a little bit about that. And then I do have some questions so that we can talk a little bit about the 1680 Pueblo Revolt. But maybe let's talk a little bit. Let's start with, since we started with family, maybe we can continue along that line at the moment, and then we'll switch gears. So can you talk a little bit about what's going on in these images and these processes?
Yeah, definitely. These I also have videos that you guys can are gonna see in just a little bit after these slides. But this is an example of how we have to go to different parts of the Pueblo to harvest the clay. So who knows how long Cochiti people have been getting our clay from this clay vein. So before we take it, we have to ask permission. We have to feed the earth, earth mother, and ask permission, state our purpose, and ask for prayers and guidance to get the clay. But once we take it out of the ground, it's still damp and it looks like dark chocolate. So we have to get like as much as we can, and then take it back to our studio, put it in the barn and let it dry out for a year, because it's like super dense and moist. So you cannot work with it, and it's so pure, you can't work with it that way. So you have to let it dry for a year. And then one of the videos that, to be able to process it, like it's so pure, we have to mix it with the pumice stone, the sand. So there's like another sample of my nephews helping me get it. Those come out as really pure white pumice stone. So yeah, this is a sample like what it looks like. It looks like chocolate, but we have to let it dry. And then this first video you'll see is like how after it's a year dried, then we have to crack it up into like 1/4 inch sizes and then rehydrate it. So it's all evenly rehydrated. So you can start that video.
Break down. I feel all broken down. Break down. I feel like I've broken down. These broken bones, they hold me up. I put one foot in front of the other, but it takes everything I've got.
Put it up in even layers and slowly rehydrate it. So it's
I don't wanna feel the pain anymore.
back to the wet state.
Now I know I am not who I was before. So while it comes and goes, there's always more in store. And there it is.
So that process is repeated until we get a full bin of the clay. And then the next video is like, now that the clay has been crushed back up and is rehydrating, then we have to go to another part of the pueblo to gather the pumice stone. So here's another video of like the hard work that we have to do to get it. And these are my nieces and nephews helping me. So this pumice stone comes out really pure as well. So we have to put it through 2 screens when we get it home to be able to mix it with the clay. And that helps kind of like what grog does. It helps the drying process and helps the shrinking in that process. So we try to make it as fun as possible. Like I remember, gathering all these materials when our parents were still here. So we pack lunches, pizzas, whatever, and we go to get them as a family and have fun in the mountains doing that. And otherwise, they're like, "Oh my God, this is so hard, a lot of work." But this is like what we have to do to use the traditional materials. The next one is when we get it home, the pumice stone to my studio. I throw on my combat boots, put down a piece of canvas. You can play it, and this is how I process the pumice stone. Gotta have good music when you're doing this. You're dancing there at that point. So when you get it to the second screen, it comes out like it's baby powder, that fine. So once these 2 materials are ready to go, then it's time to mix your ball of clay. So that's the next video. And we really don't have a exact measurement or percentage. We really protect our clay because it's so precious to us. So like I know more or less when I would make like a medium pot or a small figure, I know exactly how much to mix. And we just test the the smoothness or the how much grog, the pumice that we have in there, just by running our thumb through it, and you can tell the texture of the clay, and you know it's when it's ready or needs more pumice stone added. So now at this point we're sculpting the pieces, and it's all by coil and scrape method how we do our pottery. But once it's all completely sculpted and dried, so we sandpaper it, and to be able to, our clay is red, naturally red. So we the Cochiti colors are white, black, and red. So we have to apply a white clay slip, which is, I found out, was bentonite. I think I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah.
And but it's all natural, right? That comes from another part of the Pueblo to be able to like apply that to the sanded piece of pottery. So here's how we make the wild spinach paint. This is for a very small batch of wild spinach paint. It usually takes like over a week to create. So these processes, gathering the clay and also making our wild spinach paint, always takes a year, because like we have to let the wild spinach paint dry and harden up, because it's like taffy kind of texture, like about the 6-month mark.
Mhm.
But when it's about a year, then you're able to just crack it off and kind of like a Jolly Rancher, crack it up and rehydrate it, and that's our black paint. But like I was telling you earlier, once all the pieces are sanded and a light coating of water put on it, removes all the dust. And if a piece will fit in your normal oven, I heat it up to 350 just to have the piece warmed up. But this is how we apply the clay slip. So once you can see it, like when you play this video, how it starts to dry out really quick, and it starts to adhere to the piece. So maybe like 10 coats, and you finally have the piece turns all white, from red to white. So at that point, it's like kind of a matte surface. So what we have to do now is we have to let it cool down, and then we rag polish it with a cotton rag. So once you rag polish the whole thing, you cannot touch it again because it comes very glossy. And anything that touches it, no matter how many times you wash your hands with with Dawn dishwashing detergent, you will actually leave your fingerprints on it, and you won't have, if anything touches it, just dirty, it will smudge the paint, it'll smudge the white surface, and it won't show up until after the firing. So it's kind of funny, like I have my little nieces and nephews running around there. No, they're not supposed to touch it, but like when we're having a sandwich or something, and next thing you know, like when you fire it, you see tiny little handprints. I was like, I told you not to touch it.
The evidence is there.
Yeah, they're learning, so it's all good. But so once the piece is completely decorated, then this is how we fire our pottery. And it's open pit fires, so we have it raised above the ground on a metal grate, and about 8 inches, and then we have a pumice stone on top of that, or a kiln shelf. So we only fire one piece at a time. All of our pots are fired on the lip upside down, and all of the figures are standing up. So if you look closely, you can see chicken wire underneath the cow manure. And the cow manure has to be gathered again and thrown in the barn and let dry for over a year till it's bone dry. So you put your piece on the stone, and then kind of make a cocoon around it with the chicken wire, and then that provides a little foundation where you could apply the cow manure and stack it around there. And then you put our fuel. We usually use cedar wood and aspen together because they burn really quick. So we have to burn it from each side of the pot or the whole mound, so that like it fires and it pulls the oxygen and like the fire straight up the smoke. So it has to you have to have like at least 2 people to help you fire this. And you keep adding the fuel until the cow manure catches on fire, which is about like 30 or 45 minutes in. And once the caluminer ignites, then you stop feeding the wood fuel. So then when it's a big bonfire going, you can't get close to it anymore. Then you just let it burn, and it probably burns for another 45 minutes, and then it'll burn itself out. So hopefully you don't hear any like popping or cracking noises while this process is going, because it's a really quick firing process. It gets really hot, but it is low fire. But it kind of like a raku, I guess, but it goes really quick and cools down, and the cow manure mound is still there because it's leaning on the chicken wire. So you stick your finger in there and you slowly pull it off, and hopefully you see the piece still all in one piece. The next slide. And there's another way, like one of my nephews, Kyle, he's a metalsmith, so he's able to build his barrels and stuff and weld them. And I tend to use that during the summertime or I mean, during the winter time, sorry. So these are two different types of methods that we use.
And really, this is not a process you could do alone. It really takes a community. It takes a lot of labor, it looks like. And that's really incredible to have that.
Yeah, I'm lucky I have my nieces and nephews because they love to go get the wood and like collect all the funny thing is about the cow manure, like my sisters will be screaming because there's a lot of centipedes out when you flip one over and collect it, and they'll, there's another centipede. But we got to collect those, and we just had to store them and let them completely dry out. So it is a long process to do the traditionally made pottery.
All right, great. Well, let's move on to the next image. And I want to ask you kind of, before we get deep into the imagery, I really wanted to start by saying that the 1680 Pueblo Revolt is a large part of the fabric of your work. And I would say, unfortunately, a lot of people probably don't even know quite what took place and what that is. And I think it would really be great if we could start there and talk a bit about what happened and how that drives your work.
Okay, so we can kind of move through these images really quick. And these are samples of my mother's pieces. And this is traditional Virgil de Pueblo pottery, which is seated figures and the grandparents or the parents sharing our knowledge through storytelling. So these are samples of my grandmother's, my pieces, and some more samples and some of my more recent work. So all of our designs are very geometric and very handed down in families. So they're all earth elements and represent like all the wild spinach, the clouds, the Cuba steps, the rain, the weather. So those are very traditional works. And then the next slide is a sample of pieces from the late 1800s. And these were what were being made at Coche de Pueblo, and they're all based on social commentary. So a lot of the pieces that our people made were broken when the invaders first arrived here, and they were accused of witchcraft and sorcery. So a lot of these pieces were broken, and this style died out. So it's basically our people capturing a timeline and capturing caricatures in clay of what was going on, documenting the whole timeline. So next image is a piece of what I wanted my family to recreate, this image from the 1800s. So to show that we are still creating the same way, adhering to the whole type of subject and imagery. But going back to the Pueblo Revolt, most people don't know about this. They don't know our history. It's been swept under the carpet because of the genocide that happened to our people. And it's America's first revolution, but it's not in our textbooks, it's not taught in our schools. And every time I do shows globally, like in Paris or Prague or Amsterdam, all of the Europeans know our history more than Americans know our history. So it's just kind of, it's embarrassing a little bit that they know more. And when I do shows here in the States, in the metro cities, in New York and LA, and even where it took place in Santa Fe, people still don't know what it is. So those are two of my main points in life that I'm here for, is to make sure that the pottery making of Coche does not die out, and then also to educate the world about the 1680 Pueblo Revolt. So taking this type of imagery of what our people done before, the next slide, then it opens up the doors completely, talking about all different types of reviving the social commentary. A taboo series is an ongoing series that lets me talk about all hard to talk about subjects like cancer or political pieces or just in PTSD and everything to comment on that. So it's kind of a prayer, the next slide, and it's kind of a way of like what our people used to do and comment and document a timeline. So these are some of my political pieces, the next one. And these are pieces that I made when in 2017 and kind of like predictions of what was going to happen throughout the whole political scene.
Yeah.
So this piece is called Cyberbully, and it's the cyberbully on his can tweeting at 5 a.m. And that was one of my predictions, was that the Twitter would really be a part of the downfall of that administration. The next slide is strength, and this was dedicated to our, we lost both our parents and one of our sisters to cancer. But this design is called the V maze design, and it's a design that I created, represents a maze and the never-ending quest to find a cure for cancer. The next one is about PTSD, and I worked with some of these veterans when I was in residency up at Colorado College, and they had opened up to me, and they were feeling like how they're being, what they went through an experience being pulled in two directions. So this is commenting on of how they were feeling. In the back, it's a little homage to like their depression, and then also getting over and living through what they've been through. Next one is about the LGBTQ community, and this piece is called "Hate is a Drag." So it's just commenting on the nightclub scene, like the drag queens out there doing their thing. Next one, and taking in this all into consideration, I started like making costumings and playing with Photoshop and thinking about the Pueblo Revolt and how this can all come together, utilizing all the different types of mediums I work with. Next one are samples of how all of these graphic designs from our family's signature design elements, how they lend themselves well to fashion. The next one, so
and to just insert and just ask a quick question, because we went through so many kind of media there, and it's so amazing to see how you shift between ceramics and fashion and textiles. But I also am really struck by the way that you're looking into the future. There's a certain futuristic and very contemporary concerns going on in the ceramics, and yet they're still touching on the past. And there's a way, when you said pulled in two directions, I kind of wonder if you could talk a little bit about that experience for you, about kind of speaking about the past and perhaps even an event that people either don't remember or they weren't educated about and they aren't conscious about, and they're not, and having that be such a driving force in the work, and then projecting into this very much of a future.
Yeah, Indigenous futurism, this goes back over 2 decades, and I was heavily influenced by, sci-fi movies and TV shows like Star Wars and Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica, right? So I knew all of the characters, like where they came from, what kind of ships they drove. So I was really attracted to futuristic stuff, sci-fi characters. So knowing that my path in this life was to educate the world about the 1680 Pueblo Revolt, I started writing a storyline, a movie script about what happened to our people. But I'm not an academic person at all. I never went to school for anything that I'm doing. I learned it through trial and error, but to create and really tell this whole storyline through visuals and through, always thinking about like how it affected me when I was a kid. Like I was so attracted to these images and these cool characters. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna incorporate these types of characters into storytelling about the Pueblo Revolt and make sure that they have to be strong characters and really cool and shiny and flashy, that to be able to stand up to, say, the new Star Wars or Avengers or now like Black Panther, right? So these are what you're seeing, how I started to utilize the fashion design, turn into costume design, getting it on garments. The next slide.
And can you also tell us a little bit about how you got into fashion and how that shift kind of happened for you? I understand conceptually, but just how you kind of got got into that? Because
Yeah,
it's,
definitely. I mean, basically, my little group of friends couldn't afford it. So all the different magazines that we seen, TV shows, back in the day when MTV first came out, when they still showed videos instead of reality shows.
Mhm.
Next one is like, I just taught myself how to sew. And, I was lucky to be able to be picked up by, Donna Karan, which is one of the hugest American brands. And she gave me the pedestal to be able to apply my design work onto her fashion. And once the next slide. So once we were able to do a fashion line, which was 2002, I was able to study under her and ghost with her to be able to understand how a clothing line would work and how everything goes together, the amount of work it takes, the whole team, the manufacturing, the design, the cut and sew, the everything about it, the dye houses. So I understood that a lot. But when we released the line in her flagship store on Madison Avenue in New York, I was able to educate or talk at least about the Coche di Pueblo and our pottery and where all these design elements came from. So it's like people that were fashionistas that have no idea about Pueblo pottery, but they're seeing these really cool clothing and prints. So I would do a lecture and I was able to educate them like this is where they come from. So everything that I do always comes back so that I talk about our Pueblo pottery
Mhm.
and to redirect their attention and wake them up and say this is what our past was, what our history was that's never been taught. So this is where it all comes from. And it's also showing like how our designs and how our people can jump back and forth between time dimensions. So a lot of the characters, the next one, a lot of the characters and a lot of the different types of the different media that I do work in, right? It goes into hospitality design, such as these carpets. The next slide. Like if you were to walk into a suite in a hotel, right? I was able to create the carpet, the chase lounges, the love seats, the bed, the duvet, the headboard, lighting, mirrors, chairs, desk, everything that you'll see in a hotel. So again, like to create conversation in a hospitality world like this, you tell everybody where these designs come from and what they mean. Because everything that I do, that I put out onto social media or into the website, they're all have a story behind them. The next one.
And
So
also, I have a question for you to kind of add to this, because this is an amazing story. There's such a power to the design on these ceramic vessels and these ceramic figures. And there's something powerful about an object that's still and heavy and has physical weight. But then there's also this exhilaration to seeing those applied to a skirt that's moving around and figure in motion and the performative capabilities of that. And what was that like for you? Is that exciting for you to see that sort of shift as well? And not to take away from the power of the ceramics, but to see it transform?
it was just because I'm like ADD all over the place. So like my head is always back and forth trying to soak in as much artwork as possible, imagery. So I'm influenced by a lot of things, all different types of media, like artist work, but even down to lithographs. So, I was able to create lithographs at Tamarin's lithographs down in Albuquerque at the University of New Mexico. The next slide is it transformed into glass. So like all the students that I do work with, I always tell them, don't be afraid of to experiment, or don't be afraid of failure, because failures are our best teachers. So the more you fail, the quicker you're going to learn what you want to learn. So glass was very foreign to me. Next slide. And it felt really within the whole futuristic part of what I was doing. So I jumped at the chance and I accepted a residency at the Corning Museum of Glass. So these are some samples from it. Next one. Sorry, I interrupted you. What you're gonna ask.
No, I was interrupting you. It was so exciting to see this transformation now into glass. And I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what these objects, how they work, how they're put together, and what they do. I'm really, really curious about these.
Yeah, I just imagine like what would all my characters have in their homes or in their spaceships, right? So I was like, all these kind of types of artwork I was thinking about set design and storyboards and creating back to like what we have traditional dances for this piece. Some of the dances are deer dances that include the ram, the antelope, the mule deer. So I wanted to bring those to life in a different type of presented in a different way. So these were born. So I was able to work with the Corning team, and there was like maybe 6 glass blowers, professional glass blowers, and I did a visit and I never knew how to work with glass, but I was able to blow the glass, and it's very similar to ceramics. It's like but except you just can't touch it with your fingers. But it's just kind of cool how the whole team has to act as one artist, because to do one leg, one person would have to be heating that up, another person will be heating up the front leg, the little spike on it, another one with the other front leg. So they're kind of all operating like as one person. So they'll kind of nod to each other, and you just feel all this chemistry going. One person will come over, stick it on there, they have to make it balance, and all the while it's turning. So it's like a very stressful but really fun process to do. And I mean, again, just don't hold yourself back, try everything that you want to try. Eventually you'll learn it. But yeah, it's just a different way of using a different media to be able to create and present the ideas that I have.
Yeah, and another group effort in the process of
Right, totally. So this is, again, it's like how to educate the world about what happened to our people, what will capture the next gen's attention. And it's the next slide. And it's just creating this whole universe, this whole storyline that I've been living in for over 24 years now. So I was like, okay, a feature film, duh. All right, this is exactly what I was in my head already. The next image is next video is like some of my friends, and we're creating all these imagery, like to do body painting and do the photo shoots at my studio, jumping around, landing on mattresses, getting that shot. So I try to develop the characters as fully as possible. So here's a sample of the body painting. These shoots are the fun, because it's the most fun, just because you're creating something out of anything, and you're always in your mind having like how you're going to photograph it, video the actor, the model, and then take it into Photoshop and really develop the character. So yeah, the students, don't hold back, try anything you want.
Yeah, it's incredible.
The next slide. Yeah, these are some of the characters that the Venusian soldiers on the left-hand side, well, actually all of them. These were a group of characters that there's 19 group of characters that I designed, and the reason why I did 19 characters was to represent the 19 pueblos that are left here in New Mexico today. So this is how my head was thinking of how to design different groups like this. But in the future of the script, the Venusian soldiers, their pueblo was bombed first, so that's why they're all wearing oxygen tanks and breathing tubes, and they're in the process of relocating their pueblo to another place so that they could still grow their food and have better quality air to breathe. But this is just a part of the groups of characters, and like using them again, like, and it just bounces back and forth. The different mediums that I do dabble in always inspire the other set of media that I work in. So if I'm like creating something in clay, I'll paint something of like the character that I want to develop, kind of a sketch for what I want to create the character to look like, or vice versa. If I do the model first, and then I take images of them, and then I transfer them and put them onto the clay, so that the clay is always the big dude telling the whole story.
Right, you kind of always go back to it. And then do you work on a lot of projects at one time? Are you the type of person who kind of finishes one thing and then moves to the next, or do you like to have lots of projects kind of happening simultaneously?
They're always happening all the time. Like again, like having ADD, you're just like, yeah, I gotta go, sew this piece. Oh, I gotta go photograph that. Okay, good, get on Photoshop. So it's just back and forth all the time. But when I want to center myself and really kind of re-energize myself is when I work with the traditional clay. So that helps me like meditate and pray at the same time. And the next slide. So it's all just kind of happening simultaneously of the prayer, re-energizing. And when I go different out of states or out of the country, like I always come back and like touch the clay, and it just automatically makes that connection to the earth and to our people. I've done it before, past family members. Next slide. So it's all just, yeah, again, just jumping back and forth between all different mediums. It's just a fun thing, and I needless to say, I'm never bored. So all these models, some of them are my friends, some of them are family, some of them, the next slide, some of them are students from like these ones were students from Colorado College, and even down to some of the professors were models too, which was fun. So I like to really incorporate all the, if I do an exhibition at one of these places or at a university, I'm able to incorporate the students and to like show them exactly how the process works for me and how I incorporate everybody. It's always fun.
And I would say that you're likely not a shy person to be able to kind of gather people up, get them to buy into what you're doing and to be enthusiastic about it and want to participate and become a part of it. It takes a certain type of person.
Yeah, I mean, our history shouldn't be boring. It has to be able to look like this and try. A lot of these characters, like the two on the left hand side, they're called the aeronauts.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the pilots of the survivor ship Armada. So what they're doing, and they're behind me also in the background here, but what their main purpose is they're us in the future. So they're coming back from the future to the present and the past. And what they're doing is collecting shards and designs and ceremonies, songs, and just our customs, and then taking them back to the future, protecting them, storing them, so that when we get to 2180, then we still have all our designs, they're still intact, and we know how to carry on our traditions. So this is like, it ties everything all together of what we're speaking about earlier about the past, present, and future. Mm-hmm. And the simplicity of how Pueblo people are, indigenous people, and how we respect the earth. And now is the time that we do have to respect the earth, because she's getting really pissed off.
Yeah.
And we have to learn like we don't, we just have to pay attention and take care of her more than we are.
Yeah, and this idea of creating a future artifact is really interesting, this idea of thinking about that as you're working and as you're producing your work.
Right. And the high fire pieces came in. I jumped at that because I've been touching it for maybe 5 years now. Mm-hmm. But like I never stepped foot in a ceramic store before because I was so tunnel vision using the traditional methods and materials. How long it takes us to create using those materials. But when the social networks came along, we used to be on this app called Periscope. Mm-hmm. And Periscope was like the original Facebook Live or Instagram Live. So what we would do, we built a little ceramics community on Periscope, and I was the only indigenous person in the group. So mm-hmm. I was so enthralled and like freaked out of like how all of, they're getting the bags of clay, and all the bags look similar, all their tools look similar, because we would jump back and forth between our studios and like give an hour over there, give an hour to that guy, give an hour to me. And we just talk about what we're doing. And it was so fascinating to me, like all these tools, and they're like, what do you use? And they were freaked out of what I was doing, because I'd be like, oh, we're going to go dig clay now. I'll take you guys there. Yes. So yeah. Most people don't dig their clay. So I slowly started to say, whoa, this is insane. Because they're using different types of glaze, like different types of firing processes. And it was just really cool to see that. So some of the friends that I made on there actually took me to Santa Fe Clay when they came into town. And I didn't know you could go buy clay that's already bagged and ready to go. Like different textures or colors, or the glaze, some down to the metallic glaze or different colors of glaze, right? So that really played into my whole idea of designing futuristic creations using all these high fire techniques now, like wood fire or soda fire, the next one.
And as we look at these, and we're gonna have to kind of go through these heads, but I'm really, really, really intrigued by these. And then there already are some questions in the question and answer box. So we'll look at these. And I guess my last question for you before I let other people ask is about these large heads that you've created and how this scale shift for you. A lot of them are larger than life as we kind of move through these images, and they're really incredibly powerful. They're domineering, they're imposing. They seem to have their own personality. And I guess I'm wondering if just sort of for the last couple minutes before we take questions, if you could talk a little bit about whether they take on their own personality as you're building them, or if you have an idea in your head and a vision in your head that you're kind of working from. And I'd be really curious, just from a creative standpoint, about how these are come into being.
Yeah, these last couple of photos, like I was able to do a residency. I was invited as up to the Archie Bray Foundation. And so I was there from the end of August through November. And I brought my friend Justin Reese, he's a wheel thrower. So we're combining designing these pieces of how, I wanted to go as big as I could get because of the utilizing the resources of all the different the hydraulic lifts, all the machinery, the huge kilns that they have up there. Mm-hmm. So we went as big as we could and to develop these. And of course, you have something in mind what you want to create, but the clay has its own mind. So she's going to do what she wants, right? As we all know. So no matter how, what I draw on a piece of paper to design it, it's always going to change, whether it be just the positioning of it or how to balance it, right? It's always going to dictate itself and, guide my hands. So yeah, these are all for shows that are coming up during this summertime in Santa Fe. So there's some works that are going to be at the Museum of Indian Arts and Culture. It's the 100th anniversary of Santa Fe Indian Market, which is the largest juried Native American art show in the world. Wow. And that happens in the third weekend in August. And then also the museum in New Mexico will have some, and then the brand new Vladimir Contemporary Museum in Santa Fe that will open at the end of August. So all these pieces that you see in these, the big pieces here are all were being made for these museums. But yeah, all of the characters are really coming to life when you see them at this size. And when you, if you go into an exhibition or a gallery opening, I want the piece to confront you and look you right at the face, be as bigger than you or as, as tall as you. So you feel the power and they have a story to tell. Mm-hmm. And when people understand what, or want to understand what they're about, and they could catch a lecture or talk to me personally, then it'll always go back to telling the story of the poet revolt.
Wow, that's so wonderful. These are stunning. I'm really impressed, and this is amazing work. I'm hoping we can take some questions now. I know there's, I'm not sure quite how many. I think we're getting towards the end of the images, but I'm wondering if you'd be willing to take some questions. We have a few questions from our audience. And I just want to tell everyone that you're welcome to keep typing in questions, and we'll get to as many as we can. But Virgil, a lot of them actually are regarding a movie. And a question, the question, so Wayne Buck asks, hi Virgil, is your movie completed now? And if so, where can it be viewed?
Oh, no. Hey Wayne, how's it going? I'm glad you made it. I met Wayne up at, he's a supporter of the ceramics arts up in the Archie Bray in Montana.
Wonderful.
A really cool person. And yeah, we're just completely, who knows, it could happen, in 3 years or 10 years. Because it's always changing all the time, and it's always really adding to the storyline. And the more people that know about it and I talk to, more doors keep opening. So it's always this constant growing of everything. So, you know, I don't know, something like on Netflix could happen, something on Amazon Prime, like, you know, like you know how Mandalorian is or Boba Fett, so like the different side characters.
Yeah.
It just, I don't, who knows, but yeah, definitely you can't, there's not a feature film, but we are working on it. And you're a part of it. Thank you for supporting us.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. We have another question from Louise and a few folks. I'm kind of combining some of them because a lot of them are similar. People are wondering if you could go back and talk a little bit more about the Pueblo revolt and the circumstances of that, if you don't mind. I know it's sort of a history that we should all know, but I'm also really glad that folks who don't know about it are willing to come out and ask. So I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind talking about that.
So the big Pueblo revolt happened in 1680.
Mhm.
So that's when what happened was, like, there was many battles before then, but there was many more pueblos before then. In New Mexico, there's like up to 43 or more pueblos. So once the invaders first got here, they were in search of riches and gold, right? So they didn't find that. So, okay, let's go take all these indigenous communities and convert them into Christianity, because they're creating very awful artwork. I don't know, but so that's what their mindset was. So in each pueblo, they started to take over, and like when they first arrived, they were very deprived of their health, and all the indigenous communities nursed them back to health because of their journey here. But in turn, then they started to enslave the people and to force them to build churches in each pueblo, which are still here, different churches. But so, like, you know, murders and killings started happening, bloodshed started happening. So finally, the Pueblos had enough of it, and a Pueblo man by the name of Pope, he was out of Wingoy Pueblo, which is San Juan Pueblo, it's just north of Santa Fe, and he devised a plan to revolt against the Spanish. So how he pulled this off, it was a very simple plan, but it's successful. So he sent runners from the northern pueblos to the southern pueblos. He gave them knotted cords, leather cords, or yucca knots, to many knots on them. So he instructed his runners to run to each pueblo in secrecy and nighttime mostly, give a cord to each the pueblo leaders, and instructed them to untie one knot every morning. So when all the pueblos had, you know, these knotted cords and started to untie it, it's kind of like a timer. So when the last knot was untied, all the pueblos rose up together. They had their first revolution and pushed out the Spanish. So that was, like, you know, a lot that went through that. That's how they pulled the first American Revolution. But most of the battles took place in Santa Fe, and finally the indigenous people cut off the water line to Santa Fe to the invaders, and forced them to leave. So they were gone for like 12 to 13 years. So they eventually came back, and this is where we're at now. You know, so it's just a way of telling, like, the whole history, all simultaneously happening in two different time dimensions. So you all see, that's why you see all the futuristic characters, but it's all telling the same story.
Wow, that's really powerful. Thank you for educating us and for talking about that. And I just want to thank you for your generosity, for coming on and sharing your practice with us and for talking with us. I do want to plug your workshop. Virgil is teaching a workshop called Virgil Ortiz, The Future is History. It's this summer at Anderson Ranch from June 6th through 17th. And they're going to be using coil and scrape building as a process to build a mid-size scale bust out of clay. Is that correct? Did I get that right?
That's right. We're going to have a blast.
Wonderful. And we're really excited. So if you'd like to join us for an in-person workshop with Virgil, you should go on to our website and register. I also want to just make a couple of announcements. Our next virtual art salon will be with painter Mike Cloud on Tuesday, March 1st. At 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. So you can log on to our website under the events page and see the rest of the lineup that's coming up this spring. Virtual events are always added to our YouTube channel and our website. So you can go back and rewatch this. You can share it with your friends. And also just to let everybody know that registration is open. So please head to our website and take a look at our summer 2022 workshops. And Virgil, I just want to give you another special thank you. We really appreciate it. It's been wonderful to talk to you and get to know you better and get to know your work. I can't wait to meet you in person this summer. And I hope you have a wonderful year until then. And I want to thank our audience, thank everybody else for being on tonight and joining in the conversation and asking such great questions. And thank you all. And good night.
Definitely take care, stay safe, and stay warm.
Absolutely. It's
And
good.
never stop creating, right?
Never stop creating. Thank you, Virgil. Thanks, everyone. Good night.